On the night Zara slid a paper crown into the pocket of her apron, folded from a kid's placemat between coffee refills and rain, she didn't know the world would someday hand her a real one. She only knew the weight of a heavy tray, the sting of hot plates, and her mother's voice reminding her to breathe. She only knew the bell over the diner door and the way strangers carried entire secret lives in the way they ordered pie. That paper crown crinkled when she moved, a small, silly promise to herself, remember who you are, even when the world tries to rename you. Years later, when the palace lights turned the night the color of champagne and the cameras begged for something perfect, Zara reached into the pocket of a dress that had its own security detail and felt the old paper pressed flat against silk. The tray she lifted wasn't metal anymore, it was an entire country's hope. And yet, as she stepped toward a throne she never asked for, she smiled. Because the crown that mattered most had always rustled when she walked. The bell over Sunnyside Diner sounded like a stubborn wish. It clanged at 2 a.m. on a Wednesday when the storm mushed the city into one long shadow. Zara, 23, memorized the rhythm of the graveyard shift the way other people memorized prayers. Tables 2 and 6 finished their fries at the same time, table 5 always needed extra napkins, the chef, Tito, whistled when the orders got complicated. She could balance 4 plates on her arm, hold a smile with a cracked lip, and count tips fast enough to know if they would stretch to her mother's medicine by Friday. He slipped in like a rumor. Dark coat, rain at the shoulders, face you'd forget if he wanted you to. He picked the corner booth that had seen breakups and birthday cakes and, once last year, a midnight wedding for 2 kids braver than they were ready. He didn't look rich. He looked tired. Zara poured him coffee. He said thanks like he'd spent the day saying it to the wrong people. What's good? He asked, eyes flicking to the chalkboard even though it hadn't changed in a decade. Depends how honest you want me to be, Zara said. The pie is honest. The mushrooms lie. He laughed, the first sound that made the storm outside seem like a backdrop rather than a threat. Pie then, he said. And honest coffee. She brought both. He ate like the food was telling him a story he'd forgotten. He watched the way she moved, quick, like she and time were sparring partners who respected each other. She noticed him noticing and raised her chin in a what? That was more weary than hostile. People look up at you when you're on a stage, they look down at you when you wear an apron. He looked straight at her, and it felt like a door had swung open on a house she didn't know she was still living in. He came back the next night. And the next. Always late, always with an empty notebook that remained empty because he talked instead. Not about himself, not really. About the weather on his childhood street, about the smell of printers from a first office, about a grandmother who kept rosewater candies in a blue tin. He asked questions like he cared about the answers, not the opportunity to speak again. What did the streetlights look like from the bus? Which song did the radio play every hour the summer she graduated? When did the diner feel most alive? Zara found herself telling him about her mother, about the medication schedule charted in purple marker on the fridge, about her brother Sammy's science fair volcano foaming up over the kitchen table because they couldn't find a tray big enough to catch ambition. She told him how she kept a paper crown in her apron pocket to remind herself to be her own witness when nobody else was looking. On the 4th night, someone recognized him. 2 men at the counter whisper-laughed over a financial news video on a phone. The camera panned to a stage, to a man shaking hands with the minister of something, to a smile as polished as a mirror. They glanced back at the corner booth. The rain-collared man tipped his head down and his jaw tightened. Is that? One of the men blurted. Ryan Halim, the other finished, money in his voice. Billionaire whatever tech. Likes privacy. Owns skyscrapers and secrets. Zara carried 4 heavy plates past the whisper, kept walking, set them down, smiled. On her way back, she paused at Ryan's table. You're good at being ordinary, she said under her breath. But this place knows a headline when it sees one. He looked up, rueful, caught. I was trying to be nobody tonight. Try the night shift in my shoes, she said. We're all nobodies until we forget the names we give ourselves. Then, softer, because she'd rather see his shoulders drop than his guard lift, don't worry. Pi is still honest. He laughed again, but it sounded like an apology. At 2:45 a.m., when he paid, he took longer than usual, like he was balancing more than math. He left too big a tip and a napkin under the check with a single line, "Thank you for talking to me like I'm a person." He signed only with an initial that could have been anyone's. The next week brought cameras. Outside the diner, photographers discovered that billionaires have hearts that keep secrets and secrets that go for coffee. The owner installed a "No photos" sign that did nothing. The regulars formed a human wall so Zara could get to the bus stop without questions like darts. The first rumor said she was a gold digger because that's the word people use when a woman has a shovel and the nerve to build. The second rumor said she had no idea who he was. The third rumor said she knew exactly who he was and planned the whole thing. At the teleprompter. "I know what it is to count," she began, voice steady. "To count tips, to count pills, to count hours until daylight. I know what it is to be counted out. If I have a crown now, it's because the world is made of hands, and so many hands held me up. I will not forget where those hands come from. If you need me, I will show up. If you challenge me, I will listen. If you doubt me, I will work. And when ceremony threatens to swallow service, I will choose the kitchen. Always." Ryan watched her with that same look from the first night, as if a door had opened and he could finally walk through. He took his vows with sincerity, with the humility of a man who knows titles are costumes unless you earn them, and then he turned to her, every camera in the world catching their exchange, and whispered, "Your way." "Both ways," she whispered back. "A door we keep building." They walked out onto the balcony. The sea in the distance tasted saltier. The day had pulled itself nearer. The crowd below was a patchwork of clothes and languages and lives. Somewhere in it, a kid held up a hand-drawn sign, "We love soup." Zara laughed, sudden and true, and the sound rose like a better anthem. She reached into her pocket without thinking and held the paper crown hidden alongside the gold, two truths at once, crinkling into the same future. That night, when the palace quieted and the world felt almost kind, she and Ryan snuck into the kitchen. They made grilled cheese like teenagers, burning the first one because laughing makes time misbehave. They ate at the counter with their elbows on the stainless steel, feet dangling, shoes off because they could. Ryan traced the crease of the paper crown on the counter with a fingertip. "You kept this," he said. "I promised myself I would," she answered. "So when the last camera is gone and the last speech ends and someone tries to tell me what my name means, I can tell them I wrote it first." He kissed her there, in the place where meals begin, and for a minute the weight of things felt like belonging rather than burden. Outside, the city breathed. Inside, the crown, both of them, rested on the counter between a plate of crumbs and a glass of milk. If you were one of the people who'd watched this story from the diner or a couch or a crowd, you might have felt something unclench, a small hope you didn't trust enough to name. It's simple and it's not. A woman who carried a tray learned to carry a country, and she didn't let the first job disappear to make room for the second. She built a door and held it open for as many people as she could reach. She didn't become a queen by leaving the waitress behind. She became a queen by remembering her, by wearing paper under gold, by refusing to choose between what she loved and what she owed. And if that makes a love story feel bigger than two people, maybe that's the point. In the end, when the crown glints and the paper rustles, what you hear is not a fairy tale. Slam it. A month later, his grandmother fell, then softened, then made an announcement in a blue dress from a balcony that faced a sea Zara had only seen on postcards. The crown would pass soon. The country wanted a wedding before it wanted a coronation. The world wanted a story. It wanted the waitress. It wanted the billionaire. It wanted to see if love could stretch across an ocean, across a headline, across a power line without snapping. Ryan asked her in the quietest way, not on a stage, not with a jeweler's spotlight, but in the diner booth where the pie never lied. He hid a ring in a sugar packet because he'd watched her laugh at that kind of magic. His hands shook like he didn't know how to ask for things that mattered. "Zara," he said, voice turned to earnest. "Will you build that door with me?" She said yes, but she said it with her whole chest and a condition: "We do this my way, at least sometimes. We remember how coffee smells at 2 a.m. We remember where we came from. If the world makes me a queen, it doesn't get to erase the waitress who learned to carry 4 plates and a future at the same time." "Your way," he agreed, relief like sunlight. "Always your way. Queenship is a choreography of details." Suddenly Zara's days were appointments with people who measured things that couldn't be measured: how to sit like you hold the room gently, which fork tells a story about a treaty, which words in which order make a nation feel seen. They gave her a tutor with eyes like a circled day on a calendar. They gave her a historical advisor who could recite accession dates at the speed of gossip. They gave her a speechwriter who begged her to replace "we" with "I," because the public prefers its hope in singular form. The palace had hallways like sentences whose subjects you could forget. It had rooms that had never known hunger. It had silence that hummed. And yet it had a kitchen Zara loved for its clatter. She felt at home with steam on her face, with knives singing against boards, with the coated tap of spoons on metal. She slipped into the kitchens whenever she could, tying back her hair, asking the head chef if she could chop. He said no until the second week, then said yes and hid a grin, then said, "You're fast," and freckled her forearm with approval. The press called her the people's waitress at first, then the paper crown when someone found a photo of her laughing at the counter with the folded place mat on her head. There were opinion pieces with titles like "She'll Learn" or "She'll Crack." There was an ex of Ryan's, elegant, wounded in her pride, who sold an old photograph to a magazine and insinuated a timeline that was unkind. There were days Zara didn't open the internet, and there were nights she read every word and felt her pulse climb stairs without legs. The palace media team asked her to sit still and let it pass. She didn't want to sit still. She wanted to work. He came back the next night. And the next. Always late, always with an empty notebook that remained empty because he talked instead. Not about himself, not really. About the weather on his childhood street, about the smell of printers from a first office, about a grandmother who kept rosewater candies in a blue tin. He asked questions like he cared about the answers, not the opportunity to speak again. What did the streetlights look like from the bus? Which song did the radio play every hour the summer she graduated? When did the diner feel most alive? Zara found herself telling him about her mother, about the medication schedule charted in purple marker on the fridge, about her brother Sammy's science fair volcano foaming up over the kitchen table because they couldn't find a tray big enough to catch ambition. She told him how she kept a paper crown in her apron pocket to remind herself to be her own witness when nobody else was looking. On the 4th night, someone recognized him. 2 men at the counter whisper-laughed over a financial news video on a phone. The camera panned to a stage, to a man shaking hands with the minister of something, to a smile as polished as a mirror. They glanced back at the corner booth. The rain-collared man tipped his head down and his jaw tightened. "Is that?" one of the men blurted. "Ryan Halim," the other finished, money in his voice. "Billionaire whatever tech. Likes privacy. Owns skyscrapers and secrets." Zara carried 4 heavy plates past the whisper, kept walking, set them down, smiled. On her way back, she paused at Ryan's table. "You're good at being ordinary," she said under her breath. "But this place knows a headline when it sees one." He looked up, rueful, caught. "I was trying to be nobody tonight." "Try the night shift in my shoes," she said. "We're all nobodies until we forget the names we give ourselves." Then, softer, because she'd rather see his shoulders drop than his guard lift, "Don't worry. Pie is still honest." He laughed again, but it sounded like an apology. At 2:45 a.m., when he paid, he took longer than usual, like he was balancing more than math. He left too big a tip and a napkin under the check with a single line, "Thank you for talking to me like I'm a person." He signed only with an initial that could have been anyone's. The next week brought cameras. Outside the diner, photographers discovered that billionaires have hearts that keep secrets and secrets that go for coffee. The owner installed a "No photos" sign that did nothing. The regulars formed a human wall so Zara could get to the bus stop without questions like darts. The first rumor said she was a gold digger because that's the word people use when a woman has a shovel and the nerve to build. The second rumor said she had no idea who he was. The third rumor said she knew exactly who he was and planned the whole thing. Rosewater candies again, about the way his grandmother used to check the weather by the taste of the air. "Salter today, the sea is coming in." He told her the story of his father crying only once, quietly, the day Ryan told him he loved coding more than ceremonies. "He didn't cry because I disappointed him," Ryan said. "He cried because he knew the weight of choosing." "You chose both," Zara said, tired, "True. Now we choose both," he said. Their mother recovered in stuttering steps that turned into a walk. The headlines softened because the news cycle moved on. The Queen's table served its 1,000th meal and then its millionth, not just from the palace but from a network of kitchens where people wore hairnets and pride. The senior advisor who had cautioned optics raised a toast in a break room with linoleum floors and said, "I was wrong. But also, I'm grateful to be wrong." The ex sent a letter nobody saw but two people felt. "I was cruel because I was afraid," it read. "I wish you steadiness." Zara pinned it to the inside of a notebook as a reminder that not all injuries need to become weapons. The day of the coronation came as days do, on time whether you're ready or not. The sky wore its best blue. The palace hummed in frequencies that made history nap in the corners. Ryan's grandmother, smaller now but bright as a bell, handed him the weight of centuries with a look that said both be careful and be happy. Ryan was to be king, a figurehead, a partner to a parliament, but a symbol that absorbed weather so his people didn't have to. Zara, who did not want or need the word queen to tell her who she was, would wear it anyway because sometimes language is service. Before the ceremony, she returned to the diner. "Are you lost?" Tito asked, voice like a hug he'd learned to disguise as sarcasm. "Found," she said. "But hungry." She ate the honest pie, sipped the honest coffee. The bell over the door sang its small song. A tourist took a photo from the sidewalk and then lowered the camera when she shook her head. The regulars pretended nonchalance, failing magnificently. Zara left cash and a note, "Thank you for teaching me how to carry more than one thing at once." On her way out, she touched the corner booth, a gesture no one saw. The city smelled like wet pavement and possibility. In the car, she reached into the pocket of her dress and felt the paper crown she'd flattened, carried, kept. She slid it into her palm, creased edges running against her lifeline, and tucked it under the strap of her bouquet. The ceremony was pageantry, yes, but it was also faces, the bus driver from the night route sitting beside a minister, a nurse who never learned how to sleep beside a duchess who never learned how to cook, a line cook from the Queen's table wearing a suit borrowed from his neighbor. The choir sang a hymn older than nearly everything, children fidgeted with the seriousness of being alive. When it was her turn to speak, Zara didn't look. Ryan stopped coming for 4 nights. On the 5th, he stood outside in the rain, hands empty. "May I come in?" he asked, as if the diner door were a gate that could keep out more than weather. "You brought a hurricane," Zara said. "But we've survived worse." They sat where they always sat, only closer. He didn't order pie. He asked if she'd seen the mess, and she said she'd seen bigger. He asked if she needed anything, and she almost said no out of habit, then said, "My mom's meds are backordered. We've been splitting pills. It's not safe." She hadn't meant to say it out loud, her voice broke on safe like a plate slipping from wet hands. Ryan's gaze tightened, decisive. "I can fix that. I don't want a favor that costs me a name," she said. "What if it's not a favor?" His voice was careful. What if it's a person who knows how to move things through systems, and he moves the thing you need because he can, and because he cares? Because he cares, she repeated, the words testing themselves on her tongue. You're good at making impossible sound reasonable. I'm better at making possible happen, he said. He made 2 calls. Her mother's medication arrived by morning with a quiet knock and a thank you note that used the word logistics instead of charity. On his next visit, Zara brought her paper crown out of the apron and placed it between them. I keep this as a reminder not to disappear, she said. But sometimes I think disappearing would be easier. It's not your job to make other people comfortable with how bright you are, Ryan replied. I know it feels like the world wants you smaller. I've spent years feeling both seen and erased in the same room. What do you want? She asked, and meant it. A life that makes sense when it's quiet, he said. And someone who will tell me the mushrooms lie. They fell into a rhythm that wasn't quite dating because it didn't have time to bloom in private. He taught her how to read the sky from a balcony 30 floors up. She taught him the names of the bus drivers on the night route. He lent her books that didn't have dragons but did have people who survived their own mistakes. She made him a playlist of songs that sounded like families making do. When he took her to a charity gala because he needed courage to handle a room of eyes, she wore a dress borrowed from the owner's daughter and spoke to the servers in the language of shifts and sore feet. On the way out, she found him on a quiet staircase, sitting with his tie undone like a boy who'd lost his place. I was supposed to be born into a house with rules, he confessed. My grandmother is queen in a country that loves ceremony. I was supposed to be her shadow until the crown chose me. Instead, my father built an empire that eats clocks and presents it as freedom. I'm both, royal in the books, corporate in the bones, and I don't know which room needs me most. You're allowed to build a door between them, she said. And sometimes. It's a promise, remember who you are, even when the world tries to rename you.